Welcome back. You're watching NewsX with me, Malvika. Now, former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has been captured by the US military along with his wife, Cilia Flores. The two have been taken to a detention center by the DEA in New York State. The charges against Maduro range from narco terrorism to holding illegal arms, including machine guns. Now, NewsX has accessed the full indictment against the former Venezuelan president. So, let's in fact take you through this entire charge sheet that has come through against the Venezuelan president. We have accessed the full charge sheet by the United States of America against the Venezuelan leader. So, this here is the sealed superseding indictment that was of course filed in the United States District Court, the Southern District of New York, and this clearly states the United States of America versus of course naming the people who have been accused, which includes Nicolas Maduro Moros, which is the Venezuelan president, senior functionaries of his government, that includes Diosdado Cabello Rondon, Ramon Rodriguez Chacin, and his wife Cilia Flores de Maduro, as well as Nicolas Ernesto Maduro Guerra, that is Nicolas Maduro's son, as well as Hector Rastenford Guerrero Flores. So, these are the people who have been named in this indictment by the United States of America. So, what exactly are the charges presented by the grand jury? So, we begin with the introduction that has been provided by the United States of America, and firstly, it states that for over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their position of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the United States. So, that of course is the first background that has been provided by the US. It goes on to say that Nicolas Maduro Moros, the defendant, is at the forefront of that corruption and has partnered with his co-conspirators to use his illegally obtained authority and the institutions he corroded to transport thousands of tons of cocaine to the United States. Since his early days in the Venezuelan government, Maduro Moros has tarnished every public office he has held. As a member of Venezuela's National Assembly, Maduro Moros moved loads of cocaine under the protection of Venezuelan law enforcement. As Venezuela's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Maduro Moros provided Venezuelan diplomatic passports to drug traffickers and facilitated diplomatic cover for planes used by money launderers to repatriate drug proceeds from Mexico to Venezuela. As Venezuela's president and now de facto ruler, Maduro Moros allows cocaine-fueled corruption to flourish for his own benefit, for the benefit of his members of his ruling regime and the benefit of his family members. So, this of course goes on to say that Nicolas Maduro, not only during his time as president, but earlier as well when he held other public offices, he has been using them to facilitate this drug trafficking. Thirdly, it goes on to say Nicolas Maduro Moros, the defendant, now sits atop a corrupt, illegitimate government that for decades has leveraged government power to protect and promote illegal activity, including drug trafficking. So, again of course, this emphasis on this being an illegitimate government that facilitated drug trafficking. That drug trafficking has enriched and entrenched Venezuela's political and military elite, including Minister of the Interior, Justice and Peace Diosdado Cabello Rondon, the defendant, and former Minister of Interior and Justice Ramon Rodriguez Chacin. So, these of course are the two other people that we've seen being named in this indictment by the US. That massive scale drug trafficking has also concentrated power and wealth in the hands of Maduro Moros' family, including his wife, the purported First Lady of Venezuela, Cilia Flores de Maduro, as well as Maduro Moros' son, as well as member of Venezuela's National Assembly, Nicolas Ernesto Maduro Guerra. So, that of course goes on to name his wife and his son as being involved in this trafficking and the profiting of the proceeds from it. This cycle of narcotics-based corruption lines the pockets of Venezuelan officials and their families, while also benefiting violent narco-terrorists who operate with impunity on Venezuelan soil and who help produce, protect and transport tons of cocaine to the United States. At various times in or about 1999, Venezuelan officials including Maduro, Diosdado Cabello Rondon as well as Ramon Rodriguez Chacin, who are of course the defendants, have partnered with narco terrorists from the FARC, the ELN, the Sinaloa cartel, the Zetas, the TDA, including TDA's leader Hector Rustenford Guerrero Flores. That of course is the final person to have been named in the indictment. In sum, Maduro Moros and his co-conspirators have for decades partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world and relied on corrupt officials throughout the region to distribute tons of cocaine to the United States. Now, this is the background that has been provided in this indictment, and it goes much into detail of not just Maduro's role, but the roles of those others who are said to be involved in this. This includes senior functionaries of the government as well as his son as well as his wife. So now the charge sheet goes into further detail about each of the defendants. And it begins of course with Nicolas Maduro Moros, a Venezuelan citizen, was previously the president of Venezuela and is now, having remained in power despite losses in recent elections, the de facto but illegitimate ruler of the country. Maduro Moros also previously held a seat in Venezuela's National Assembly between 2000 and 2006, acted as Venezuelan Minister of Foreign Affairs between 2006 and 2013, and acted as the Vice President of Venezuela in 2013. He succeeded to the Venezuelan presidency after former President Hugo Chavez died in 2013, and during his own presidency continued to participate in cocaine trafficking with drug dealers and narco-terrorist groups. In 2018, he declared victory in a disputed and internationally condemned presidential election in Venezuela, and in 2019, the Venezuelan National Assembly invoked the Venezuelan constitution and declared that he had usurped power and was not the legitimate president of Venezuela. Nonetheless, he continued to exercise the powers of Venezuelan presidency, causing more than 50 countries, including the United States, to refuse to recognize Maduro as Venezuela's head of state. In 2024, Venezuela held another presidential election that was again widely criticized by the international community, in which Maduro declared himself the winner despite widespread condemnation. So we will of course continue to go through the details that have been provided, and you can see the full background that has been given by the United States in its indictment. You can see the details of the defendants, but that of course includes Nicolas Maduro being given by the United States while it brings charges against the Venezuelan leader. But let's in fact go across to our guests who are joining us on the broadcast. We have Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, former diplomat, Major General Gigi Dwivedi, Global and Strategic Defense expert, Robinder Sachdev, International Affairs expert, joining us on the broadcast as we take a look at this major development. Firstly, of course, I would like to go across to Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta. Sir, we now have accessed the entire chart sheet and we are going to go through it in full detail. But currently what we've seen is of course Maduro, two of his senior officials in his government, his wife, his son being named, a full background being provided of how these charges they go much into history before he even took over as the president of the country. How do you see these charges that are being brought by the US against Maduro? And you know, it of course centers around drug trafficking and his alleged transport of cocaine into the United States of America.
Good morning, everyone. You see, there are many questions that arise from this whole process. Firstly, whether Maduro was a legitimate president or not. I think a third party on its own cannot decide on that. It should be decided by the country and their citizens on the basis of the electoral process. If there is a illegitimate winning process, obviously the citizens of the country should rise against that and challenge that in the local court. So that is one problem, that the US is now sitting into judgment about the legitimacy of election of President Maduro. Now, that is one problem. Second problem is whether he is involved in drug trafficking or not, whether he is heading a narco traffic cartel or not, that issue will be decided by the court. But the court cannot be a court in a third country. Either it should be the international court or it should be the court in the country where this has happened. Now, US has taken the jurisdiction and they are going to file a case against him in US courts. Now, how far it can stand, legitimate in terms of international law is a very questionable, issue. I think either the UN should take charge of this or the International Court in Hague should decide whether he is actually involved in narco trafficking. Then only the facts will come out. But even in the US courts, we don't know what would be the final verdict. That will come out in course of time. But I feel that the way the US authorities can manage issues within US obviously will go against Maduro. Apart from that, what I feel that this extra territorial jurisdiction on any country is not desirable. It sets a very wrong precedence. Tomorrow US can arrest anybody from anywhere in the world and then they can bring him to the courts in US, putting some charges XYZ. I think this sets a very wrong example. This is not the way international politics is done. This is not the way international relations are governed. This is not the way the UN and the international charter, mandates on these issues. So I feel that this is basically a facade. The whole process was to change the government in Venezuela, and this facade has been, put in place, and the courts in US will be asked to judge on this. But in any case, the regime change has taken place, and now the US will decide who will be the next president. Over to you, Vaishali.
Of course, sir. I also have Major General Gigi Trivedi who's joining us. Sir, we're taking a look at this indictment, and as Ambassador Gauri Shankar also stated that, the question that arises is how will the US be approaching this, because we can see in the charge sheet that they've placed emphasis on the fact that he was an illegitimate leader of Venezuela. They have also specified that the Venezuelan National Assembly also, stated that the election was illegal and he had usurped power. So, what sort of a bearing do you think that is going to have? Because we see them clearly emphasizing on the fact that he was an illegitimate leader and he's not recognized as the president or the leader of the country by more than 50 nations, including the US, where of course this trial will be taking place.
Well, Vishali, first and foremost, the world runs between the two spectrums, or the bandwidth is, very large. One is the idealism, that is the world is run as per the rules and laws that have been laid down, and the bodies that have been nominated or selected run the international law. And second, of course, is the use of force, and that is also another end of the spectrum. And her history is replete with examples where force have been used by the powerful people or the powerful nation against the weaker nations, and this is no exception to that end. The second point is that every nation want to serve its own interest, and America has its very clear-cut interests which have been enunciated recently in the U.S. national security strategy, that U.S. will ensure that it has a influence, and also it runs the show in the Western Hemisphere and particularly in Latin America. So therefore, this change of regime, or I would say change of dictatorship, because regime is still in place, is actually to serve the US national interest, in particular the interest of President Trump. Now the issue is how it has been done and what are the implications. Yes, definitely President Trump is known to use his own ways and means and their new normals. And this whole operation has been planned with a very clear cut political military aim, and that was to remove Maduro from the scene because as a dictator he was not acceptable to either Mr. Trump or to the US at large. And therefore, this has been done through a very clean and a very professional military operation because it has been done without much of collateral damage or without much loss of life, but a lot of preparation had gone into this, and that's a subject by itself, that is the military dimensions. But coming to now, what exactly is the fallout? The fallout has multiple facets. First and foremost, it sets a precedence and to remove a government of a nation which have been either legitimate or illegitimate. That's as the ambassador said. It purely depends upon the own citizens, and their outside agency really has no, de facto role in this. And secondly, it's going to have implications both internal for Venezuela and region at large, because removing a person, actually regime has not been changed. The regime is still in place, but a person has been changed. So that is one, that there'll be a lot of instability, and I doubt how can America run Venezuela through couple of its representatives. That's not going to happen. So Venezuela is going to see a lot of turbulence, and the Latin American countries around are also going to have the impact, because if that is the precedence, then the other nations also, like Brazil, Lula is not in good books of President Trump, and so also the other nations. So they'll have to now start hedging or start some political maneuvering so that this sort of thing is not repeated. And the third point is there's going to be again now a contest for the superpowers, because after all China is fully backing Venezuela. So this battle of superpowers will be fought on the ground and also in the international bodies, as well as Russia also is part of the support team of Venezuela. So overall, when you see three things stand out. One is the precedence of changing the regime, which of course America has a history right from the last century. About dozen times they have indulged in it. So this is continuation of the American policy. Secondly, serving the national interest by weaponizing the geopolitics, by using the force to achieve your aims. And third, making the globe and the region further turbulent, and that is going to have implications both political, economic, and otherwise. Vaishali.
Absolutely, sir. Rabinder Sachdev, international affairs expert, is also with us. Sir, thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and we're of course taking a look at this document and going through it. Now, the fact of the matter is that regardless of why this was done by the United States, Maduro is going to be charged and indicted in the United States, and we can see that it is focusing its arguments around this drug trafficking, and the charges go back to before Maduro even assumed presidency in Venezuela. So what sort of action do you see the US taking now? What is the outcome that we can expect with all of these charges that have been listed out, that go back to much before he was even leader, and which are centered completely around this cocaine trade that was allegedly being done by him?
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you. See, regarding Maduro and his wife, by the way, I mean, sorry, it seems that some due process will be followed, and at the end of which, every likelihood that he'll be put into the cellars and the jails for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, some such number would be the sentence handed over to him. It seems that way. Secondly, also important to note that, they abducted not only Maduro, but his wife also. And one reason for that, and the key, though she is also mentioned in the charges as a co-conspirator in this entire thing, she is actually a member of the National Assembly of Venezuela also. That's a member of parliament, right? For the last 10 years. She's supposed to be a smart, brilliant lady. And it said that she has been a good supporter, partner, and the brains behind Maduro also. So America wanted to take her out also, because if it took out only Maduro, left the wife back there, she would have, mobilized and crystallized much more opposition to whatever the US is doing. So they wanted to take her out also. So that's the one thing. The other thing, if you see in this entire operation, other than Maduro's fate, is that uh, the US bombed out the mausoleum of Chavez, okay, intentionally. Chavez is the godfather of left and socialist policies in Venezuela, and and a hero of many people of that, in that segment. So by bombing out the mausoleum and the statue of Chavez, America is sending a clear signal that it does not want any leftist socialist ideologies in its quote unquote backyard. So that's a very, pertinent thing to note, I would say. Uh, at the same time, the morality and the legality, I think before me, of course, Ambassador Gauri Shankar and General Dwivedi ji have very clearly articulated. I think all of us are very clear that what has happened is absolutely a flouting, not only a flouting, blatant of rule of international regime, international organization living. In my sense, it seems to me it reinforces, if not reinforces, it takes me again, reminds me that the world is heading into a jungle or back. Okay, what we are seeing increasingly is an approach of might is right, okay, which America is fully using. Trump believes that America has accumulated a lot of wealth, America has accumulated a lot of technology and war weapons and tools and all wherewithal. He thinks that what uses all of this sitting in our warehouses and our bases, he wants to use the might of America, which America has accumulated over the last 100 years, towards furthering the objective which he thinks is the right objective for America. And that right objective, one is, of course, that Western Hemisphere is completely our game. There is no other game in town. It's only the United States of America. Uh, Another fallout of this whole operation, I think, would be on Cuba. See, Cuba imports about half of its crude oil from Venezuela. They had an agreement, a special agreement way back in 2000s or so, at cheaper rates. And in fact, in exchange, Cuba supplied and supplies technical professionals, including even military advisors, doctors to Venezuela. That was the exchange kind of a thing. Now, with the blockade in place and with what's America has a blockade in place, right? The regime not fully changed. Okay, the head taken away. But essentially, it means that Venezuelan oil will not flow into Cuba now. So Cuba is already in an economic hardship situation. It will be forced to buy from the open markets at higher prices, right? So Cuba will take an economic hit, another one. And in fact, down the line, one can expect that sometime, we don't know when, Cuba would also be a target of the United States in the same in the same flow and narrative of things that America has done. One last thing, maybe. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. There's a case studies in geopolitics, and books would be written, should be written, could be. Is that Trump positioned this as an exercise in law enforcement. Okay. There are a couple of advantages to that, why he did that. One, typically a US president cannot declare war on his own. He has to go to the US Congress and get that approval, so to say. In any case, Trump would have done it and not even taken approval and gone back to the Congress later, right? But he positioned it as an action by the law enforcement agencies. So therefore, when the Marines or the Delta Force kidnapped Maduro in his house, they were accompanied by law enforcement officials. And if you see at the press conference which Trump held yesterday, I think he or Marco Rubio said this was an operation of the Department of Justice supported by the Department of War. Okay, the Department of Defense in the US, they call it Department of War now. So they said that it's a exercise and it's a simple exercise of getting a criminal, a drug trafficker back to face American justice. That's the way they're positioning it. But of course, the bottom line is that oil, huge. Uh, it's a huge asset. America, if they can control it, and now they're talking about they will run Venezuela. The word they use, couple of like, we will run again and again. They said. So how they run Venezuela to be seen. But one of the things they'll do is that they'll continue the blockade. The naval and air block they will keep so that nothing can come into Venezuela. No Chinese weapons can come in. No Russian weapons in case even Venezuela buys or whatsoever. So that would be one step of running Venezuela. The other step would be to control immediately PDVSA, the Venezuelan State Oil Agency, which is the mother of all energy assets, oil assets of Venezuela. And I think Trump will involve executives from the oil industry because they are going to benefit. Drill, baby, drill. They're going to upgrade the infrastructure. And these oil executives, senior ones, are wheeler dealers, of Chevron, ExxonMobil, and all. So they will put together a team of those wheeler dealers and not send them to Venezuela yet. I don't think they can. But from the US, they'll be coordinating, they'll be in touch with the opposition leaders in Venezuela. But a lot must be happening right now.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. In fact, I would like to thank all of my guests, Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, Major General G.G. Dwivedi, as well as Rapinder Sachdev for joining us as we, of course, take a look at this very important document that has been released, and we will continue to go through it in much more detail. But for now, viewers, it's a wrap for this bulletin. We'll slip into a very short